Well, good afternoon, everybody. This is Anthony Cirillo, creator and founder of Sage Stream, the live stream interactive entertainment network for older folks. We welcome our subscribers and we also welcome folks watching on the National Association of Activity Professionals private Facebook page as well. We have a different program today. You know, we've been doing a lot of music, but we'll get to that in a second. I just hope you had a great Halloween, and now all the craziness begins. Right before you know it, you'll blink, and it will be in a new year. So we started out a little slow with the trick-or-treaters on Tuesday, I guess, and it picked up a little bit. And as I started running out of candy, I put a note on the door and put the rest in a bucket, and that's it. Silenced my Ring camera, and nobody seemed to be too upset. I think we snuck by with just enough candy, though I did keep all the Reese's for myself. So anyway, today we were very excited this morning. There's a trade journal in the long-term care industry called McKnight's Long-Term Care. And he did an article today about how some health plans, one plan in particular, are starting to pay for music solutions that are in the marketplace. And they were featuring one particular solution, but at the end of the article, they actually mentioned us and one of our customers, one of our subscribers, Wartburg Senior Living. They are using us in their adult day center and assisted living. So we were quite excited about that, but even more excited that health insurers are starting to pay attention to these types of solutions and understanding that they have a health benefit to people. So we're really excited about that. So that's my little bit of housekeeping for today. I'm going to put my headphones on. And there we go. I'm bringing my guest, Lori Grinker. Lori, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm fantastic. So just a backstory on Lori. I am one to scour the papers every day for interesting people and topics. And one day, the Washington Post did an amazing article on Lori, and we since had subsequent conversations. And well, you know why? I don't need to paraphrase the article. Lori, why don't you give a little background of who you are and how we got here and what you're going to cover today?
Okay, thank you. Hi, everybody. I wish I could see you all. Excuse me. So actually started my career a very long time ago when I was a college student. And I was studying art and communication design, and I took a photojournalism class. And we were told to find a story and try to get it published. And I started visiting kids who were training to be boxers in Catskill, New York. I was in school at Parsons School of Design in New York City. And there was a female who I was very interested in, although people weren't that interested in seeing a female boxer. And there was a 9-year-old boy, and I got that story published. But one of the kids who was there was a 14-year-old named Mike Tyson. And that's a story that I started following, and it took me into the world of boxing, which I knew nothing about. And it took me into the world of journalism. And from there, I traveled around the world doing all kinds of projects. But today, I'm going to share with you Mike Tyson from my book of the same name, which came out last year, September.
That's awesome. So I'll give you the stage in a second. But I think the article actually in the Washington Post was about a series you did, and I know our viewers would be interested in this. It was is about dementia, correct? And
Yes. So I started helping my mother out, and COVID hit, and it was a very difficult time. And being that I'm a photographer, I started photographing everything. My idea of what I wanted to do then, though, she just was about to move into assisted living, but it got delayed because of COVID. But she had a friend there, and they were these two little mischievous ladies, and I wanted to do a little film about them in the assisted living place. So I started photographing that and all my mother's things that brought back so many memories. And She moved in 3 months later, so I continued to photograph. And I got a grant to do a book about that, and I am working on that now.
Awesome. Well, good. So we'll try to get that link to people as well. So you're going to hear fake applause, which means the screen has changed, and we'll have that two shot where you are in the corner and people are looking at the photographs. As I tell people, things happen, though we haven't had any issues in a long time. But people work on construction around my neighborhood here, and they cut fiber optic lines, so you just never know if something's going to go down. If it does, just stay tuned. We'll be back, but we're hoping that's not going to be the case. So, Lori, I'm going to change the scene. When you hear that applause, you could just start, and we'll catch you on the at the end. Thanks.
Okay, so I'm starting off here with the cover of my book, and you can see it's pretty powerful in the red lettering and the little bit of a fist that you see of Mike. This is when he was about just turning pro, 18 or so. And I'm going to get into the book here. And this is one of the first pictures I took. And this is Mike at 14 years old. He was quite a big person. And he's doing sit-ups. And this is one of my favorite pictures, actually, and one of my first. So what does that say about a 30-year career in the field? Often our early work is our favorite. So they would be in the gym working out. This gym is still there, and it's a part of the police station in Catskill, New York. And there's this stage, so you can see they have the speed bag, and on the right there is Billy Ham, who was the boy I was doing the story on for my college class. And all the way to the far left is Nadia, the female, who I was also photographing. And then with his arms raised, you see Mike and then one of the other kids. So they had a club. It was the Catskill Boxing Club. And they would train here. They would stay at Customato, the famous boxing trainer's house up in Catskill, and they would train in the gym. And this is in the back of the gym. And then they would go to boxing matches in different places in the region. So as they're training, you have Customato, and Mike was very intent on learning and studying and hanging on to every word of Customato. And Mike had just come out of a reformatory, and they saw potential in him, and Cuss really saw the potential in him. And Cuss would say to me, you should follow Mike. He's going to be the next heavyweight champion. But I was interested in the anomalies, the girl and the little boy. So they would all eat dinner together. This is Camille, who was Cuss's wife. And she made these big, actually Thanksgiving-like meals, meat and potatoes. And these are the three of the boys training on the left, and Mike. And you see Billy in the back. Between Cuss and Camille is Teddy Atlas, who was the co-trainer at the time. And training went on all the time. So here's Cuss in his bathrobe. In my book, this is a fold-out. And he's showing the moves to the boys in the living room as they're watching TV. And then they're off to the boxing matches. So you can see Billy Ham here, if you can see my cursor. There's a little tiny kid, and Mike right behind him. And it was very hard to find matches for Mike, and they always thought that he was lying about his age, and they had to show proof of his birth date. And he, everybody could see that he had what it takes to become a heavyweight. So they would play games in the car going there. they're playing dollar bill poker, which I've never played, but there was always a lot of laughter and fun and jokes, and there was also a lot of discipline. Camille made sure the boys did their chores, and it really was a nurturing place, and it was giving these boys discipline and a way to get off the streets, and really a way to turn their lives around to whatever difficulties they were having. So here they're going back into the house after one of the matches, and you can see Mike is laughing. It's just, a lot of laughter. He's a very funny guy. So then I started playing around with portraits. This is actually the original picture that I took that detail from and turned it into black and white for the cover. So I should say, at the same time that he was learning to box, I was learning to photograph boxing. And I would experiment with lighting and different ways of capturing what I saw in the gym. So we're moving on, and Customato passed away, which was a real turning point in Mike's very young career. And he was still determined to work out and to train. And you see here, there's Mike, there's Jimmy Jacobs here, who funded the house with Bill Caton here. So they owned a company called The Big Fights. And Jim Jacobs also passed away. You have Jose Torres here. And he was very concerned about being photographed at the funeral, and Jim tried to explain to him that this is part of what it means to be in the public eye. And so I have some questions here. How Mike took to me when I initially approached him. This is a good question. Again, he was very shy, and the more I stayed on, the more he got used to it. And, Cuss welcomed me. As he turned pro, he got a bit more difficult. And as his life got more difficult, he became less reliable. We've seen each other over the years. The last time I saw him was in 2012, when I was asked for Rolling Stone magazine to photograph him at his Broadway show that he did with Spike Lee. And they used a lot of my pictures, and he was just talking about his life on stage. And as far as people from Mike's past, sadly, so many of them have passed away, and some of them turned out not to have Mike's best interest at heart. So I really don't know, aside from the people that are part of his family, if he keeps in touch with anybody from the past. So again, the funeral, and here you have Floyd Patterson at the far right, and this gentleman here is Cuss's brother, Jose Torres. This guy became part of the entourage. He might be somebody that Mike's still in touch with. And this guy, whose name I'm blanking on now, he's out in California. He became a politician, actually. Kevin Rooney, sadly, at a young age, developed dementia. And so he's had a struggle in his life. And then Jim Jacobs here passed away as well, right after Mike turned pro and won the heavyweight championship. So what I loved about photographing boxing were just these little details, how they worked out, how they wrapped their hands, little gestures. Everything almost seemed choreographed. And it was almost like watching people rehearse for dance, even though they were rehearsing or practicing to fight, which I'm not a big fan of. But what I really did take to was the thought that went into it, and that might have had something to do with training with Cuss and Kevin here, who was a really good trainer. And it takes intelligence, it takes smarts, it takes a lot of thought, it takes a lot of calculations. You have to know exactly when you're going to throw the punch, what kind of punch you're going to throw, how you're going to move when the other person throws a punch. And with photography and boxing, you also have to know when to click the shutter. And it was a big learning curve for me. So this is sparring. And then we're back at the house. You can see it's the 80s with the big boom box and his friends. And I don't remember who these guys are, but this is the one who became a politician whose name I'm blanking on now. And I don't have the book notes in front of this. But it's a nice scene. It's nice to see the kitchen. That's the entry to the house in the back. Mike read a lot. I think there's a picture in here of him reading, but he would be at press conferences and he would be up on the platform and he'd be reading boxing books. He studied all the time. And I've heard that when he was in prison, he studied a lot. And of course, he converted to Islam, so I'm sure he was reading the Quran. And here he is reading the American Pigeon Journal. So pigeon flying was and still is a big part of his life. And there was like a cabin out on the property with this long ladder up, and he flew pigeons. And flying pigeons is a real tradition in Brooklyn where he was from, and they still do it there. So this is the pigeon coop and the ladder. And there you can see the house in the background. It was a big Victorian house. And again, I brought a light in. I had this long extension cord because it was so dark in there, and I wanted to start shooting in color. And this is another one of my favorite pictures. I just love the blur of the wings and the pigeon above Mike's head and the ones to his right, to our left. And there he is on the property looking up at the pigeons. Do you see all the way in the back? There's solar panels. So this is in the 80s, and they had solar panels. It always impressed me. So here we are, Christmas shopping. And Mike's singing in the store because they had music playing. And I have like a little series of these, but only one of the pictures made it into the book. But I think you can get a sense of his personality from these. And there's Camille. So Camille really was a mother figure to him. And, you know, Mike's mother was alive. His father had left them when they were young. He had a sister who I have met, and she died. All these different people died around the same time, and it was really, really hard on him. And his brother is, I think, an emergency room doctor in Los Angeles, but he had been around sometimes. So they did all right for two boys from a tough home. But Camille really raised him, and again, she had an iron fist. She was from Ukraine. So aside from reading, he would watch fight films. Jim Jacobs and Bill Caton had a fight film company called The Big Fights, and they collected all fight films that were ever shot, and then they would lease them out to all the different news organizations or anybody making a film, and they would bring them up to the house in Catskill for Mike to study different boxers and their moves. So this is in the attic. And he would go up there and just run the films and watch. So this is the living room. Very Victorian looking, good old-fashioned television. Ring magazine on the table. I think a local newspaper on the table. There's four people in there. You could see this guy over here in the chair, and his name was Frank, and I don't know who that was. And here's Mike. Mike lived in this house, and when he was taken out of the reformatory, he was brought to the house, and he was living there, and Cuss became his legal guardian. The other boys lived in the house. On maybe one or two stayed for a long period of time, and sometimes professional boxers stayed there, like Wilfredo Benitez, maybe Roberto Duran, and they trained up there. But the other kids would come on weekends. So they would be in school during the week, like Billy Ham, the young kid, and they would come on weekends. So this is one of his early fights. It's in Troy, New York, right near Troy, New York. It was against a guy named Conroy Nelson, and it was my first time photographing a professional fight. And you're basically put in a spot on the ring, and this wasn't a super crowded stadium, but when you shoot the big fights, you're stuck where you are. So if the action happens somewhere else in the ring, you don't necessarily get it. But in this one, I was in a good spot. I could see him getting into the ring. There's another one I really love, just how I love how the tongue on his shoes are hanging out, and just he's kind of sweet and menacing at the same time. I didn't find the sport frightening. I found it challenging to photograph, but I also think, I've been in war zones and I photographed some really difficult things, and I find the camera kind of separates you. So with boxing, I'm sure there were times when hard punches were thrown and blood was flying and you saw a cut, and I probably did not like that very much. But again, you're removed a bit, having the camera in front of your face, and you're just trying to capture that. So this was 30 seconds in, and he comes at the guy with this left hook, and the guy's out, and Mike wins the fight. So I just happened to be in that spot. So that was very lucky. And there he is, victorious. So now we're in Las Vegas. And sometimes I was hired by the big fights to go and photograph Mike. And sometimes I would just make my way down to Las Vegas and stay in this is before Las Vegas was fancy. And I haven't been there in a long time. But I would stay in some cheap motel and then go to Caesar's Palace or wherever Mike was training. And other times I had assignments, so I got to stay in those hotels. So this was just obviously a posed picture of Mike with Jim and Bill posing in front of the sign and about to win the WBC championship title. So here we are. I have to say there are other photographers who were better at boxing shots, and you can see some photographers down on the lower left here. Back to this picture, Mike's like standing on probably like a cement piece that the fence is put in, so he's much taller looking than the other two gentlemen. So back to the fight. You're like elbow to elbow with all these other photographers, and you're shooting film, and you have to quickly put your arm behind you to change the film. You would have an assistant. I think I didn't always have an assistant, but they had to change it for you, because if you're changing film and something happens, you miss it. A question: where did Mike get a sense of humor? He seems very likable when young, sweet and threatening. Yeah, he, I don't know where he got it, but I would hang out with him. And Steve Lott is another major character who Mike was in touch with for a very long time. But Steve passed away about 2 years ago, which was very tragic. And Mike and Steve and Kevin would just be laughing all the time. Mike's just very funny. When I went to photograph Mike for Rolling Stone at the theater, I had already talked to his wife, Kiki, and she had asked me to give Spike Lee a really good deal on my photographs. So, everybody makes money but us. And so we had made all that arrangement, and I said to her, I wanted to do a book of my photographs. So when I saw Mike, and it was a nice reunion, and I told him about this, he said, you have to ask my wife. And I said, I already did that. He said, oh, that was your first mistake. So he was a quick wit. And then they sent me to their agent, their literary agent, and David Vigliano. And that was, I actually ended up with a publisher that I already knew, but who does more photo books. But so this is Berbick falling. And there he's down. So Mike becomes, at this moment, the youngest heavyweight champion in history and still holds that title. So there's Jose Torres. This is Steve Lott. You can see him a little bit right here. And Don King. So Don King was a big promoter, and this is his, it's Don King Productions. So he's promoting this WBC heavyweight championship. And there were different boxing promoters, I guess, for the different titles. And the first thing he does when he gets upstairs in the hotel room, or the second thing I'll say, is he picks up the phone and he calls Camille. And he really couldn't believe it. It was like, obviously like winning the lottery, even though he had worked so hard for it, but it's a dream. This kid from the streets who really was rough, and now he's, the heavyweight champions are the celebrity's celebrity. And I was never employed by Tyson, ever. I sometimes worked for the big fights to shoot stuff for their archive, so training and things like that. But I would get assignments on my own, and I would pitch stories to magazines, and then people started to see that I had access, and I would go with a writer, and different magazines around the world started doing stories on him once he became heavyweight champion. But he was really unreliable, throughout, and then when his life got more complicated again, he became more unreliable. And I know some very famous photographers who he didn't show up for. So finally, after many years, I found out it wasn't only me. So here he is out on the balcony of the hotel with his belt. And now we're getting into a series of the next fights. So this is Bone Crusher Smith. And so there were 3 belt titles. I think his name is, well, I forget his first name. He just had such an incredibly strong punch. And this is Tyrell Biggs. So these are him winning the next 3 titles, WBC, WBA, and this other one that's like not that recognized. But so the other promoter, big promoter, was Donald Trump. So here you have Donald Trump with Larry Holmes and Don King with Mike, and they would always do this press conference. They do a weigh-in and they pose for pictures. I had a friend who helped me rig up some cameras all the way up at the top so I could get this view, but you can see here how the photographers are just elbow to elbow. Like, look over here. I don't know if I can zoom in on this. Not really. But you can just see, and then you have all the announcers and writers, journalists there. And, at these fights, you had everybody. You had every major celebrity. And it's, really takes you back to the Roman days and, this kind of sport. So there the ref is giving the count, still counting, and it's over. And this is Michael Spinks, and now Mike is winning his next title. The IBF title, is it? Or, I don't know. So here you have in the ring Don King and Mike Tyson and Muhammad Ali. And I have to say, I got to have breakfast with Muhammad Ali once. And then later on, I got to go to his place in Pennsylvania. He had like a ranch. And he was very, very nice to me. And I actually went and photographed him when he came out of retirement. So here's Mike with his 2 belts, leaving the ring with Don King. And he's outside now on this limousine, and people are starting to come around him. And inside the limousine, so this is Rory Holloway, who became part of the entourage when things started to switch from Jim Jacobs over to Don King, but it was all very on the sly. And he wouldn't let me go to the parties with him. So I got in the limo and had to get right out. This is the model Beverly Johnson, who he dated. So all of these women were interested in him. And he was, again, very shy. And for a long time, he would talk to Cuss up at the house, how he didn't think he'd ever go out on a date or anything. And so here we have a party. This is in Atlantic City before one of the championship fights. And it's Madonna and Sean Penn, who were married at the time. And I never did paparazzi photography. So you would go in, and this was my first experience of it. And they let you stand around a table where all these celebrities are, and they give you a few minutes, and then the actors or whoever's there keep talking, and then you go to the next table. And this was just them leaving because they were kind of fed up. And here's Ivana Trump and Malcolm Forbes. Quite a hairdo. And Warren Beatty and Jack Nicholson. So it was fun. I have to say, I made more money on these pictures than on mostly anything, but I still didn't want to become a paparazzi. So here you have Jesse Jackson, Donald Trump, and Don King, and Jesse Jackson was running for office. And Jesse Jackson's entourage dressed in gold. So this is all that same party in Atlantic City. And now we're back home. So my book kind of goes through different phases of like being young and being at the house, and then training, and then title fights, and then like friends, and then marriage. So this is this yellow silk bathrobe that Beverly Johnson gave him. And he's drinking hot chocolate. And here he is in the house with 2 local young journalists coming to interview him. So we're still like 86, 87. He met Robin Givens, and really, I think it was when they got married that he moved out of the house. And as he won the title and got more and more money, and we would be in Atlantic City, he would go to tailors and have his clothing made, and he'd buy a lot of the big jewelry that Jim and Bill really tried to keep him from that whole 80s look. But that didn't work. And that's about when Jim died. So this is one of the looks they tried to avoid. But it's so 80s. And then he got the Rolls Royces. And he's driving through Catskill in his white Rolls Royce. And he's the local celebrity. Here's a cop chasing him for an autograph. This is in Atlantic City. And here we're at the police firing range where I first shot a gun. I think I've done it twice in my life. It's definitely not my thing. Here is at the dentist. So I always thought this was really funny. And of course I have more than one picture of it, but it's just like to see him with his gold watches, you know, his gold bracelet and his golden diamond watch, and, you know, with this thing coming out of his mouth. So I had very good access. It was a lot of fun. And here is the private tailor. And so this is another part of the story. And this is 87, I think. I had been trying for a long time to go with him back to Brownsville, Brooklyn, which is where he was, where he lived with his mother and sister and brother, before he was sent to the reformatory. And it took 2 years to get him to take me there. And now we're in his blue Rolls Royce. And so as he drove up, all these kids saw him and they found a paper bag and they just started ripping up the paper bag to get his autograph. And just people congregated around, you know, this very poor neighborhood. Now we're in his friend's apartment where he was getting his hair cut. So that's what got me there was, you know, he was making a trip to get his hair cut. So I always wanted to go there. He never, you know, would dictate what I was photographing when I was with him in a way of saying, do this or do that. But he definitely would get in moods sometimes and say, I don't want to be photographed, or again, not show up. So that's me, of course, in the mirror. Some of the guys from the hood. And now he's with Robin Givens. And this is their wedding reception, which was at a hotel on Fifth Avenue called the Helmsley Palace. So they had actually already gotten married, but this was their celebration. And you have Robin in the middle and Robin's mother on the left. And Robin's mother was like he married Robin and her mother. She really controlled things and really started to manipulate things. And so I would say, you know, Mike was still very humble, and, you know, I was there as the photographer who was always there. I was the wedding photographer by default, I guess. I didn't get hired to do this. And the thing I really saw here was like the opera that was Mike's life. You know, these characters come in, he falls in love with the beautiful woman, and then Jim Jacobs dies, and then they don't want him to be around all these white people. And then suddenly Ruth and Don King were best friends. And all these things just started happening, and you could see Ruth on the phone all the time and like setting things up in a way. I'll get more to those stories as we go on. This is Mike's sister. And again, she passed away a year or so after this. So this is still at the wedding party. And this is, oh, see, I'm having a senior moment. I'm blanking on his name. This is the guy that found Mike at the prison, the reformatory, and saw something in him and brought him to cuss. And he's still around, and they might actually still be in touch. So I did some wedding portraits as a gift. I like how giant his hand is. It's kind of an imposing picture. They were actually fighting during this photo session. And this was at the house in Catskill up in the attic, and I put a backdrop in, and a friend came and helped me, and we lit it. So now we're going to Japan, and this is leading up to the fight where Mike lost the title. So he was married to Robin. It's 1988. I flew with him to Japan. Robin came over later, and Robin and I left together. So I was just there to photograph the training, but not the fight. And so we were talking on the plane. He was in first class. I was in business class. And I went up to first class to photograph him, but they kicked me out. So he came down to business class to talk. So we're just talking in the seats, and I'm photographing his teeth. So this is training in the gym in Tokyo. And Kevin Rooney is still the trainer. This is us in a limousine ride. And you know, the word for yes in Japanese is hai. And you can see the phone there. They had a phone in the car. And so the driver was talking. He kept saying hi, hi, hi. So Mike kept saying hi, hi, hi. It was very funny. So here we are meeting, it'll come to me. His name will come to me. He was a Hawaiian sumo wrestler, and he moved to Tokyo, and actually women weren't allowed in the center, and Robin and I convinced them to let us in. And you know, they're just laughing because you know how big Mike is, and look how big oh, it'll come to me. So running in the morning with a bunch of Japanese runners, people would line up all over. Photographers would line up, and journalists. And there was a Japanese photographer with the Japanese promoter, and I was there with the American promoter. And we were always allowed behind the line. People actually did a story. One of the magazines there did a story about me and Mike. He would jokingly introduce me as his cousin. So here's the hotel, him and Robin. And this is when, you know, she started telling these stories that he got physical with her, that she was bruised. I saw her down to her underwear, and I never saw a bruise. But this is where a lot of the manipulation started. So this is, I can't remember if this is, I think this is back in New Jersey, or it might be still in Tokyo. Yeah, it's still in Tokyo, just hanging out. That's Steve Lott in the back and Kevin Rooney on the right. This is downstairs in the lobby of the hotel, the Otani Hotel. And this, to me, showed the tension, like the beginning of the split. So this is a portrait that I made of him in the gym, and this is one of the times where he wasn't showing up, and Jim Jacobs was still alive then, and he had to go up and make Mike get up because I had been on assignment for like Newsweek and Time, and he came down and he's yawning, but to me it was like a scream. So we always use it, you know, to illustrate kind of the tension around Robin and everything. But going back to Robin, because I don't think I have these pictures in here. Let me just see. um, she was flying back, and I flew back with her, and her mother picked her up at the airport in a limousine, and they offered me a ride, but we had to go to New Jersey and look at a house first. And it's a very long flight from Japan. But of course, I said yes, and I was taking pictures, and it was Bernardsville, New Jersey, and it was this like castle like place. And she took all this money and she bought it. He actually called me that night and he said, "So, what was the house like?" So, they kind of used me. Um, and they bought the house, and she started really taking money, taking advantage. Um, so now we're back to training. And this is getting ready for another fight. She would count the ripples in his stomach to see when he was really in shape for the fight. So this is just a series, like his head, his chest, and his hands. Kevin Rooney and Jose Torres in the ring. So this is Robin. If you can see right here, there's a grape. So she's throwing grapes and he's catching them. So this is back in Atlantic City, uh, earlier, and Bob Labooty was this gambler who had this incredible suite given to him by Donald Trump in this Trump Plaza in Atlantic City, and he lost money. He lost millions and millions of dollars. So of course they give you a big suite, so you come, and he would serve Iranian caviar and just lavish plates of food, and he always wanted pictures. And he said he would pay me, but me not being a very good business person, I would say, just pay me in caviar. So I would bring the caviar, these big tins, back to New York and have it with my friends. So here you can see Robin and Mike. This is Bob Labooty. He gave Mike like a $40,000 gold Rolex. And these are the guards, and this is one of the sparring partners. But this is just like a tiny meeting, and you see all the food there. So this is, they've been married for a little while now, but I think their whole marriage was like 8 months. um, was Mike a gambler? So Mike, at the one of the casinos, I think it was Las Vegas, he gave us all some money, like $200, and of course I wanted to keep it, but you had to play. But I don't think he was a big gambler. Um, anyway, so now Robin's in a wheelchair and she's having a miscarriage, and I honestly don't believe she was pregnant. So this is Mike at dawn on the boardwalk in Atlantic City, and you have to get up before him and be out there. And I got somebody who had a vehicle, and I could sit on the back of the vehicle. But you went out every morning. If you didn't feel like getting out of bed, you were out there. So it took a few days of me getting up at the crack of dawn or before to get this shot. So he lost the fight in Japan. He lost his title. He's now about to give an interview at HBO Studios in New York City. This is Rory, who was one of the people who wasn't such a good friend, but was an old friend. He seemed like a nice guy. Maybe he was one of the better guys. And there you see Don King in his fur coat behind him. And even though Mike's got a black eye and bruised up, he's still having cake. And this is all these people outside taking photographs of him. And here you can see his bruised knuckle and his black eye. And this is from my contact sheet, and I always liked this kind of double-headed figure. And here we are at the theater. So this is 2012. So he'd gone to prison, he did this play, and he really turned his life around. And he seems to have a good life now. He seems healthy, and he smokes a lot of marijuana. He has a pot growing business. He's got a lot of businesses. His daughter, he's got a bunch of children. They seem to be doing well from what I see online. And his daughter's training to be a tennis player. So he's left, he was living in Arizona, and now they live in Florida. And there we are in the car, a parting shot of me and him making fun of my glasses and my smile. And that's it.
Wow. You were young then. Wow.
I was young, yes.
That's an amazing experience to go through back then. Crazy. Wow. So, normally when I have a music guest on, I'm darting in and out. I'm monitoring stuff in another room. I'm doing some paperwork, but I have had my headphones on and watched this entire episode. So I really appreciate it. We had great interaction. Deborah, particularly from Mooresville, North Carolina, which is about 3 towns up from where I live. She just gave you a bravo. So
thank you, Deborah.
So there you go. And we had people in Billings, Montana, watching, and in Florida. So at least the ones who told us where they were from. So this is fascinating. Great photography, and we'll have to think of another topic for another time. But this is a great alternative to all the music that we've been doing. So it's nice to experience something different, and it was fascinating.
Well, it was fun. Again, I just wish I could see you all, but I think it is a great thing that you're doing, Anthony, that this can be live streamed to all these places. So I'm really proud to be a part of it.
Well, I appreciate it. So I'm going to change the scene with, you'll hear the fake clapping. You are then free to go. I don't think we do fake clapping then, but I will do some final paperwork here, and we'll see you next time around. And this show actually does repeat at 7 p.m. So thanks again, Lori.
Okay, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right, folks. So you have to say that was an amazing show. Just great questions. Thank you from the folks out there who were submitting the questions. And I had questions of my own, but fame's an interesting thing, and then to go from nothing to all the things that he has accomplished, and he's sort of become a cult icon as well. So pretty amazing stuff. So it's Thursday, which means we'll be back. At 7 o'clock, this show will repeat, but we will be back next Tuesday with a great show. So it's a duo who's been with Sage Stream a while, but this is their actual first performance for us. They're called Acute Inflections. It's a husband and wife African-American duet. They've been on the stage with Jennifer Hudson and Keith Urban and others. Very high class, and they're very funny together. They interact. Part of it, I mean, she's an amazing singer. He plays upright bass, and she sings. But it's the interaction in between that's a lot of fun. My wife and I had an opportunity to see them in Charlotte. I don't know, maybe 6 months, maybe more. I don't know. It was a while back, but within the last year. And they were just delightful. And so I know they're going to be a lot of fun. And then next Thursday, we have actually another husband and wife. They're called Meet the Bacons. And boy, we did a sound check maybe 3 months ago or so. Their harmonies will blow you away. That's about all I can say. So Acute Inflections next Tuesday at 2. And then, of course, we have Meet the Bacons at 2 o'clock on Thursday as we roll right through. You know, we have our programming set through next May already, and we're shooting to have all of next year booked as soon as possible so that we can start having fun with this. and not have to worry about all the booking stuff because, frankly, I do most of this. I do all of it myself. So, if you know anybody who we're having a holiday special, so you can gift Sage Stream to others with an individual yearly subscription. If you use the word caregiver in the coupon code caregiver, it'll get you another 10% off. And of course, if you are a community, we also have a special code for you as well that you can get 25% off an organizational membership. Just go on our website there, and if you need to email me, you can contact us pretty easily. We always try to encourage people to fill out the QR code survey that goes behind that picture there. It measures the performance, the person who was our guest, the technology, how it functioned, but more importantly, the behavior change and if impact it has on the loved ones that you're caring for or your residents in your community. So with that, I wish you a great weekend. I am originally from Philadelphia, so no offense to Dallas people, but we're hoping to kick your butt on Sunday at 4 o'clock, 4:25. We actually have a Dallas friend coming over, so we're hoping to put it to him. But good luck to the Philadelphia Eagles. Congratulations to the Texas Rangers. And I think we're pretty much up to date. So everybody, we'll see you next Tuesday. Remember, this repeats at 7 p.m. this evening. Thanks a lot.